welcome back everybody to our podcast, Unapologetic, the Third Narrative.
Our original and authentic initiative in light of the war in Israel and Gaza.
A platform where we will share our identities, views, and experience from the ground. One day, we're going to start an episode declaring and talking about a ceasefire and a hostage deal. But today isn't one of those days. Today, we woke up with when was it? It was yesterday, right?
It was like 6:20.
Yeah, but more details came out today about 12 and counting of the young children of Majd al-Shams that were innocently just playing in a football field while all of a sudden a Hezbollah rocket took them away.
Yeah, it's one of the harder episodes to start, honestly. And it's been a rough morning, I would say. Just seeing everything, all the images, all the videos. Someone who loves football myself, just seeing that happening on a football field, gives me the creeps. And yeah, it's terrifying, honestly. And there's so much to talk about in that regard. I have so many thoughts in terms of things that were said about it, things that haven't been said about it, wrong information about it. It's been overwhelming. How do you deal with it? What do you think about what's happening? What frustrated you the most about it?
What frustrated me? Well, I think we're all very numb to this at this point, to what happened. Numbers of people dying Gaza's casualty count is going up and up by the hour. And then you hear something closer up north. I can't say that I'm more moved. I think I'm really numb to what's going on. I'm not proud of it, but I think that I'm really numb about what's going on. Because it's happening it's happening to us. We say that every episode. And I think the way that my brain tries to protect myself because I'm afraid is to just numb the feeling down. What upsets me the most is how the 12 children and teenagers that were killed are being used as propaganda right now.
A political pawn.
Like a political pawn to justify a retaliation onto Lebanon in a full-out war up north. I think the Golan Heights, we need to talk about the historical context of the Golan Heights. And I'll tell you what I know and you can correct if I have any gaps. But the Golan Heights, I feel like, is a very similar situation to East Jerusalem. Where during the 6-Day War, it was captured by Israel. And then, I don't know at what year, but then it was decided to be annexed. And the people there who are Syrian Druze, who nationality-wise are Syrian, were offered citizenship. But what we remember during our beginning episodes, we talked about the Druze. The Druze are very loyal to their place of being. So they're loyal to Syria. And they see themselves as Syrian, so they rejected citizenship that was offered to them by the state of Israel, and they see themselves as illegally occupied in the Golan Heights. And right now, what is being seen, and I didn't talk about this on social media because it's not the point to talk about what they are, who they are, the land that they stand on. It's the fact that 12 young children were taken away way too early in an undescribable way. But right now, Israel is putting up the Druze flag alongside the Israeli flag all over to say that we will avenge our citizens. We will avenge our Druze, Muslim, Arab, Israelis, however it is. Everyone says it in a different way. And people are taking the bait. People are taking the bait and calling for war when they don't know they know exactly what that translates to, but it's just it's really frustrating, that entire propaganda thing. And also there's people that are from both sides that are forgetting the 12 people that died and are talking about the argument of were they Israeli or were they Syrian? It doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was The Golan was taken by Israel in the Six-Day War, and then the annexation itself happened in 82. And after the annexation, there was actually an attempt to forcefully give them citizenship. There was a massive riots within the Druze community at the time that ended up in Israel withdrawing from forcefully giving them the citizenship. And after that, it became something that was, that you can apply for it. The difference from East Jerusalem is that the application here is much easier because you don't have as much political connotation as
up north
in the Golan, because you're not tied directly to the rest of the, like, you're completely cut off from Syria, so there's no political connection with Syria after that. It's not like East Jerusalem is still connected to the West Bank. And there hasn't been, that violent retaliation from the Golan Heights itself. So if you apply, most probably you'll get it, which is completely the opposite from East Jerusalemites.
Yeah.
Like if you threw one rock in East Jerusalem, you probably won't get the citizenship.
If you threw one rock 20, 30 years ago,
you won't get the
citizenship.
And there it's different, but still, I think if I'm not mistaken, the number is about 92% of Druze residents of the Golan don't have Israeli citizenship. The numbers have increased since the beginning of the civil war in Syria, but not dramatically. There's still so many things that are connected. They feel Syrian. There's the other factor of, the Assad regime is still in Syria. Yeah. So if you get the citizenship, your family might pay the price.
Back in
your
Syria.
Extended family back in Syria. Yeah. So there are a lot of elements that prevent them from wanting to take the citizenship. So they're residents, they're not citizens. And
the majority of them, I think the big argument on the Israeli side is, they're our brothers and sisters. They serve alongside us in the army. It's not the case up in the Golan Heights.
Because they're residents. They don't serve in the army. And there's a cultural divide between the Syrian people of the Golan Heights and the Syrian people of the Galilee, who are the ones who are full citizens. They have conscription, they go to the army and are very loyal to the state, and the majority. The majority of the Syrians in the Golan, the Druze in the Golan, are still connected to Syria as well. So there's a political difference, there's a cultural difference. It's interesting, in the Golan, it's culturally acceptable to drink among the Druze community. In the Galilee, it's a no-no culturally. Like, they have their own divide culturally between the two communities, but the two communities do feel connected because they come from the same religion. But I guess, one of my frustrations was them being called Israeli Arabs, because they're not Israeli. They're not Israeli citizens. And another thing that really frustrated me was something that our friend Rula from Standing Together mentioned, how, only 2 days ago, 15 kids were killed from bombings in Gaza. And the Israeli public was so horrified about the 12 children in the Golan, which they should, but are completely oblivious, don't think about it, don't talk about it when their kids being killed in Gaza.
They are oblivious. I'm not justifying their ignorance towards, or lack of knowledge, or lack of willingness to know about what's going on to the children and the people in Gaza, but the media censors everything. Like, even the journalists, what are they coming out to saying? Just wait about social media. I'm talking about social media, because I'll tell you what I think about that in a second. Because the journalists are saying that we have never seen this kind of brutality before. 12 children dead by a Hezbollah airstrike. That's what the media shows. That everything else that's seen on social media by Israelis are seen to be fake, that it's not true. They don't believe it. And the amount of propaganda that needs to come out from the state for Israeli citizens to be so unwilling and believe full-heartedly that what they're seeing of beheaded children, I just have that image in my mind that I saw a few days ago from Gaza, or like body parts all over the place, seeing it as fake. It's like the amount of propaganda that's coming out is leading them to that. And they're still, like, believe it or not, 10, are we 10 months now while recording this? 10 months later, they are still focused on October 7th and the hostages and the people that are still in Gaza. So not that I'm excusing it, but just to know where it is coming from. They do believe that it is the tragedy that they haven't seen like before.
Yeah, I guess you're hitting the nail there. That like the whole atmosphere in Israel is that you need to, like, everything that you see coming out of Gaza, you need to treat it with a grain of salt. That it's probably fake, like that kind of attitude to anything that we see, and also you don't want to feel that you did this.
Yeah. That's also the thing. Same way on the pro-Palestinian end, where they don't believe what happened on October 7th, and they
people ask for videos.
Yeah,
there's like hundreds of videos, and they're like, no, this is fake.
So it's not far-fetched to me how the human brain would refuse to receive something like as harsh and as bloody as what is going on right now from the river to the sea. So but we can't have that kind of propaganda, and the two narratives bind us apart. We need to like try to untie ourselves from what is like blinding us from seeing and empathizing. And like, funny enough, I had this conversation with someone on Instagram DMs last night, telling me on how, talking about the Palestinian flag on the Olympics, and how they say that it's very traumatizing for them, yada yada, the Palestinian flag. And we had a nice conversation, a very polite conversation about it, and how
it's possible on social media.
Yeah, believe it or not.
You see, guys, it's possible.
And we talked about how trauma is there from both ends. And when a Palestinian sees the Israeli flag, they don't feel safe. They don't feel the same way as an Israeli feels when they see the Israeli flag, and vice versa when an Israeli sees the Palestinian flag. So, but because of the guilt that you talked about, or the feeling of being ashamed, and you don't want to feel that feeling because no one wants to feel that feeling. And I told her that this feeling can be used for good. Like, when you feel ashamed, like, let that make you feel accountable, and that you have a responsibility towards that feeling, because you are, like, your name is being used in a wrong manner. What can you do to, like, save it on both ends?
Which was not the topic of this episode before,
Nope.
Yesterday. It was going to be...
On a happier note.
It was going to be a much more light episode today. And but we had to obviously start by talking about this. But...
So, if you follow our social media, you know that this episode, we asked to gather a few questions for Ibrahim because of the happy situation or occasion of his birthday. Ibrahim's birthday is on the 3rd of August. And we wanted to, like, address the issue of the differences between our opinions. And we feel like if it's dialogue, it might be like a big area of gray zone. So what we're going to do now is to ask a few questions of my own and questions from the audience, from the people that have asked, which there are a lot, to Ibrahim, and to see your answers.
Guys, just FYI, Amira's birthday is 10 days later. She's on August 13, and the next episode will be about her. And so help me with good questions so I can ask Amira. So just heads up, prepare your questions, follow the story that we'll put out so you guys can give me your questions to Amira.
Yes, we're both Leo babies. Okay, so one of the questions that we got maybe 3 or 4 times was, what does your family and friends think about your work, your message, and is anyone opposed? Why?
Luckily enough, I have a very supporting group of people around me. My family at large is very supportive. My mom, she's like she raised me to be who I am today. I look at the world in a humanist way because that's how I was raised by my mom. And I'm thankful to her because she didn't raise us to be, divided religiously or to look at ourselves as one group versus other. Like, she taught us to look at the world and people as humans. And I get a lot of support from her, even though we sometimes disagree on certain things, but that's completely okay. She supports my message of peace and the path that I've taken. And my best friends all, my closest friends are the ones who were with me from the first day that we started the podcast. They were listening on the episodes, giving me comments, and you met them as well, and they would give us comments on some of the things we do. I know they sit down with me and talk about some of the episodes and are very, very supportive, and I'm grateful for that. That's if I always tell them, if I have your support, I don't care what anybody else in the world thinks, to be honest. Like, as long as I got my people are the one next to me, then that's what matters to me. And that will help me, say my piece, no matter if people disagree. I have some people in my, close circles and family who don't agree with my message and path. There's some people who have a lot of frustration, anger, or desperation, that they don't believe we can do a real change. They don't believe the system can change, and I understand them. Some people don't have that belief that we can change. I do. So, but none of them have ever opposed me. Even the ones who disagree, we always say our house is a very democratic house. So we agree to disagree, and that's okay. And that doesn't affect our relationship within the family.
Okay, interesting. So how this works, am I allowed to intervene
You
and
can
ask
ask
you
whatever
more
you
nutty
want.
questions?
Whatever you
Okay.
want.
Okay.
This is the floor.
Sababa. Okay, I'm a little
I'm
old-fashioned. I have a paper. Okay. Someone said, "Happy birthday, Ibrahim. How do you stay encouraged as a peace activist among all the hate?"
I'm a positive person by nature. I think my mom raised me to be a very positive. I was a positive person since I was a little kid. I was one of those kids who would just walk in the morning to my parents' bedroom as a 3-year-old and just knock on the door and just open it and be like, "Good morning." Like that was me. So I don't think I lost that. And I'm a realist. I know the situation is shit, but it doesn't prevent me from believing we can do better. And I think it's because I see the good in humanity, even though there's a lot of bad things in humanity, but I see the good things in it, and I'm just focused on that. And it's easy to look at the negative. I'm just focused on the positive. It doesn't mean that I don't have my tough days, my tough times, but on the overall, I remain a positive person.
And when you do fall victim to the negativity, do you do anything specific? Do you shelter yourself from the world? What do you do exactly? Like, you told me that you try your best not to read comments, specifically the hateful ones. But let's say curiosity got the best of you and you drowned in the pool of hate on our social media, because there is a lot online. So what would you do? How would you cure yourself, get yourself out of that hole?
Honestly, that doesn't really that much affect me, to be honest. It's like, if I'm negative, it's not because of that. It's not because of people's comments. It's more of things that are happening, devastating event that happened, or a sequel of things that are happening that can definitely put me down. And I just close up and become very unresponsive to messages, to people around me. Even my best friends sometimes struggle to reach out in those few days that I'm like, I just need to be by myself, less interaction with the world, and just be in my own head. And then I get out of it and I go back to normal life.
These are going to be really random, okay? So the questions are going to go from personal to political to social. So this question is actually an interesting question, which is, what could a history class in Israel that includes Jewish and Palestinian history look like?
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Yes. What can a history class within Israel, so an Israeli school, an Israeli history class, that wants to include both the Palestinian and the Jewish-Israeli narrative, what would that look like, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. I mean, the challenging part is that the vast majority of schools are separate. There are a couple of mixed schools, and I think they do a really good job of talking about, bringing everything together. They talk about Independence Day, and they talk about the importance for the Jewish people to have their own independence, but also talk about what happened, what was the price to achieve that independence for the Jewish people, is that we, as our people, had to pay that price. That my grandparents had to pay that price. And so they talk about Nakba stories. They mention all of the complexity. I think one of the things that we as humanity do is that we, there's a quote that says, history is written by the victors. And I think the best thing that we can do is to have an inclusive history that talks about all the negative sides, because we like to hide and shy away from our negative and the darker side of our history. And I think a good history class will talk about everything and will take people to everywhere. We mentioned it, that it's before, that it's ridiculous that the first time that I've ever gone to a Holocaust museum was only 2 years ago. That we don't go in school. And definitely Jewish schools don't go to like an old Palestinian village that has been that is now ruins. A good trip will be go to different things and to see the different histories, to see even contemporary history, things that are happened since the establishment of the state on both ends. The horrors of life in Hebron, and some of the catastrophes of the bombings that ruined families and lives. We need to see all these things in order to accept that we need something different.
And do you think it would be more achievable or better achieved in joint schools, or they have to start separate first? Is it something that we can start integrating now? Like what?
So I think right now the mixed schools are doing a pretty good job at it.
How do you know?
From some teachers that have shared with me in the past about that taught in mixed schools, and they told me about the curriculum and how they bring all of the stories, and they talk about Nakba, and they talk about independence, and they talk about separate memorials, and then they do a joint memorial.
Okay.
So
everyone has their room.
Yeah, everyone has their own space, and then they join together in one space to mourn together after they mourn separately. And you can do these things together in a mixed school in a very beautiful way. Currently, in the separate schools, I think we just need to slowly integrate more and more content that will, bring to light the story of the quote unquote the other. For us to see, in the Arab schools in Israel, to see more of, understand more of Jewish history as the history itself, and actually maybe to be taught by the other. When you're taught about Zionism, this is something that we learn in school, in history. But you're learning it from an Arab teacher.
It's ridiculous.
So you get the perspective of an Arab teacher about what Zionism is, or about Holocaust. Like Holocaust, the way I remember being taught in school is pretty much just a part of World War II.
Yeah.
Not as its own thing. And without being taught by the other, with the feelings and the emotions of the other, you'll feel disconnected from it. And it's just dry sentences on paper. So maybe, just like sometimes they do with Jewish schools, you have an Arabic teacher who teaches Hebrew, or a Jewish teacher who teaches Arabic in some schools. Maybe the history teachers should be mixed.
Wait, hold up. You want the person to explain Zionism to be a Zionist?
To be a Jewish person.
Yeah, okay, that's what I understood.
And the person to talk about, in order to learn about Nakba stories, you need first recognition of Nakba, Palestinian identity, and then to start to learn about it. And even before, some schools are doing it independently, and even Jewish schools. Some Jewish schools do it independently. Very liberal schools, but it's not impossible.
Now, I've heard of schools doing that the same, but they're not liked schools.
They're not prevalent. Yeah.
No. Okay, so this question is going to trigger a few listeners, so brace yourselves.
Oh God.
Okay. Seeing the ongoing genocide of Palestinians, do you feel guilty sometimes for giving an equal space for two pains when one is clearly greater?
That's a tough question. I think the guilt I do feel is a guilt of having a better, quote unquote, a better reality than theirs. That, especially knowing that I could be in that reality. If my grandparents went to a different place than the ones they did, they could have ended up in Gaza. Now we're talking a lot about Lebanon, and there's a fear of a war with Lebanon, and there are, refugee camps, Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. We could have been there if my grandparents continued marching towards Lebanon. So that guilt translates to me to responsibility.
Okay.
And I think by talking about these things, I'm taking responsibility, but I do feel that in order for us to get to a better place, we need to, even if one side has more suffering than the other, we need to detach ourselves from our biases a little bit sometimes. And yes, it's a hard mission, but to talk about both sides, because talking about one is not going to solve anything. It's going to put the Palestinian story more, to me, it will maybe feel better that I'm talking more and more about the Palestinian side of the situation, but that doesn't develop into a change in the reality. How many people have talked about the Palestinian suffering in the past 75 years? Only. So many. But in order to transcend to a better reality, we need to talk about both sides and to give space for both, because that's the only way that both sides, including the Israeli side, can see something different, can also try to absorb the suffering of the other. When you only talk about your side, then the other side's not going to listen. So what does that achieve? Just to talk in an echo chamber? It doesn't help. Not enough.
But don't you think that way you'll fall victim to both sidisms? Where you can't say, because that's another question, where whenever you want to talk about Palestinians, you have to mention the Israelis and vice versa. And that's not how it's supposed to be. We don't wait for every single Israeli after mentioning the hostages to talk about the Palestinians in Gaza, because he can or she can hold a space for the hostages by themselves. But when it comes to talking about Palestinians, specifically when you're talking about Israelis, is what about this? What about this? What about this? So I see you, I hear you, but what about the power dynamic? Because if you're just bringing two unequal people, that regardless of the pain that this person is talking about and the greater pain, but the control and the power is obviously on one side of the scale and not on the other side of the scale. So when you empower both voices equally, are you empowering the power dynamic as well?
So I don't think so, actually. I think it's quite the opposite. I think when even the side that is more powerful sees that you also have empathy for them, that softens their power. That actually gives them a place where they are willing to listen to the other side's pain, because they can see that you recognize their pain. Even if their pain, quote unquote, is, if you want to put it on a scale, is lower than the other side because the other side is suffering more.
No, I didn't talk about suffering.
But it's important that they see it or learn about it, or even be open to it. Be open to, that there is another side, because you are giving them space as well. If I'm only going to talk about the Palestinian side of things, we won't have Jewish audience. But within the reality that we have in our podcast, we're talking about both sides. So we have Jewish people who are listening to us, people who used in the past the term Israeli Arabs and now changing it to Palestinian Israeli instead of Arab Israeli. So that wouldn't have happened if I'm only talking about the Palestinian side, because they're gonna feel that this platform is not for them. They're gonna only listen to the pro-Israeli news podcast, whatever you want to have it, and the pro-Israelis will only listen to their own. And only by combining both, you can have people from both who will be willing to listen. And I think part of our, at least how I feel, part of our role is to give more context into the Jewish audience that comes from a Palestinian voice. And that is almost impossible. Well, not like it's very rare to have it, a large Jewish audience if all you're talking about is Palestinian side. Mm-hmm. But if you talk about both, then they feel they have a space and they will open their hearts to listen about the other side as well.
I'm going to tug on the power dynamic a little more because you didn't address it.
What's important is the end goal. Some people are focused on the power dynamic at the moment.
But the power dynamic is important. It's key.
Important, but I look at the end goal rather than the path. What's most important is the end goal. Even if the Israeli side is seeing that I'm being sympathetic with them and that strengthen their position in some way, I don't know. but they're still now, within that context, are opening to listen about the other side as well, which they might have not. If they didn't feel empowered by the podcast, then they wouldn't listen to the Palestinian side of the story.
I'm going to say something and take it with a grain of salt. I agree with you. I would listen to you, but as a Palestinian, I would value what you say more if it were coming out of a Gazan's mouth at this moment in time. If a Gazan, who's right now the most Palestinian that is suffering, is telling me the most important thing is the end goal, then fine. But if a Palestinian living within Israel right now that is, let's say, not under immediate threat, living their day-to-day lives as normal up until now, tells me that the most important thing is the end goal, my reaction would be, and I would assume that the Palestinian reaction would also be, well, what are you suffering? What are you giving up until that end goal is reached? Why, like, how can you declare the compromise on behalf of other Palestinians that have already lost so much? And then I want you also to talk about the power dynamic again. So, the question is not you talking about both Palestinian and Israeli pain. It's hosting people and the Palestinian and Israeli narrative alongside each other and keeping in mind the power dynamic.
So on the point of the goal, I actually disagree. Mm-hmm. Because you cannot ask the person who's suffering, hey, let's think strategically on how to change our reality. He's suffering. He's not in the place of, I'm going to, have a clear head. I'm going to have a clear strategy of how I can change my reality. He's currently in the suffering. And I feel that because we have a different reality, we have a responsibility. And our responsibility is to take action in order to change their reality. Mm-hmm. And for 80 years or so, 75 years or so, most of the people that came out from our community only talked about that side. How did that achieve any change in our power dynamic? If you want to talk about power dynamic, we as the Palestinian citizens of Israel are very weakened in terms of our political power, our ability to do any changes within the Israeli politics dynamics at all. Because for 75 years, we've only had one-sided approach that we want to talk about our people's suffering. We want to focus politically on only our people's suffering, and that hasn't achieved anything for us politically in terms of helping our own people across the border. And, that strategy has been tried. It just had not worked. Mm-hmm. It's not about, Ibrahim is the first person ever to do it. We had politicians and activists for 75 years before us who did that. And what did it do? We have a war in Gaza right now, 75 years later. That means it didn't work. And we need a different way. One of the things I believe that can change the power dynamics within Israel is a mutual Arab-Jewish party. And that cannot happen if you, as a Palestinian, Israeli citizen, is only going to talk about the Palestinian side of the story. How are you going to bring these Jewish people with you to make a real change in the political dynamic in the state? You only have the Palestinian votes, which is 20% of the population, 60%, 40% almost doesn't vote. So what kind of political leverage will you have if you cannot touch the hearts and minds of the Jewish people within the state, that we can take this place into a better future that will also help our own people and you? Because if the Jewish people within that power dynamic are not going to see their interest at the end of the day, that the change in this reality will be in their also interest, they're not going to change. They're just going to stick on the status quo. They're, quote unquote, more comfortable in the reality that we have than the Palestinian side, that's for sure. And with the suffering that we have right now. But
last nudge from me, and then I'm going to move on to a different question. How do you ensure through that strategy that you don't lose your Palestinian identity and don't forget who you are, if you're always open to and wanting to please the Jewish majority, while also it's going to be a constant struggle?
Yeah, but I don't think I'm trying to please anyone.
I'm not saying, I'm not talking about, I'm saying the political strategy that you said, that you need to appease the Palestinian voter, the Jewish voters.
It's not even appease. It's to show that you, as someone who's trying to make a change, you see them also, because they're part of the power dynamic. if you're not going to see them, if you're not going to feel them, why would they go along with it? They have, talk about power dynamics, they have the power. If they're not going to empathize with you, if they're not going to feel that you also see them as well, they're not going to give you the power on a political level to make a change. They're going to keep the power to themselves. But if they believe that you have the ability, if you have enough capacity to see also their side as well as your own, and without sacrificing your own identity, you're strong about your identity, strong about your Palestinian peoplehood, but always, you have a place in your heart for the other side. That's for me the King's Road, as they call it, is to be yourself, but not to, eliminate empathy to the other side, because that just doesn't help, is the way I see it.
So as you know, I also posted the questions to my social media, to my platform, and I got some interesting questions. And one person, I translated the question into Arabic and specifically wrote Palestinian Israeli in Arabic to get a few responses out of people. And one of the responses was also from a Palestinian that is originally from 48 Palestine, that said, where was the question? There is no such thing as a Palestinian Israeli. It's a 48 Palestinian. And I went through, I had a conversation with her. It's not that I just took her question. Mm-hmm. And she says, when you're asked, where are you from? And you say Israel, because you're a Palestinian Israeli, that legitimizes Israel and delegitimizes everything that, talking about your parents and grandparents, everything that your parents and grandparents went through, the Nakba, the killing, the expulsions. It's not representative of the Palestinians that live within 48 Palestine. So she's basically saying that you're a Palestinian Israeli kind of blurs or doesn't give enough importance to the Palestinian cause, and actually legitimizes the occupation, as she sees it, the entire occupation of Palestine, all of it.
But that's because her look at the situation is that there's no such thing as Israel.
She is willing, and I had a conversation with this, she's all for a two-state solution, but she sees no allies. And she is like, my Palestinian identity always has to be compromised. And that's why she feels like she needs to fight. And that she also said that when you say Palestinian Israeli, you also don't recognize the 10 years that your people were under military rule.
I know the history.
And I know that you know the history, but when she is talking about it, she's saying that it just undermines the experience and the trauma of your specific people, she's separating the rest of Palestinians, of your specific people, where they did not choose to become Israeli citizenship, to have Israeli citizenship and to become Israeli citizens. It was just given to them.
Right.
So you saying Palestinian Israeli just on the front without any explanation, kind of misleads and doesn't do the 48 Palestinians justice.
So first of all, when you say, you're Palestinian Israeli, that's just a statement on its own. It's never without a question, because that's a term that no one ever heard before, or it's a very rare term. So it's always comes with an explanation. It's never just out of the blue and just I throw it out there. And it's better than the one that's been given to us as Arab Israeli or Israeli Arabs. At least here, I'm making sure that our emphasis on our peoplehood is part of our citizenship, because bottom line is we're Israeli citizens. We fly with Israeli passports, whether we like it or not. It's our reality is within the state of Israel. And I think sometimes when some of our people from the Israeli citizen part, when they say I'm only Palestinian, I think that if I only say I'm only Palestinian, I'm actually hijacking the suffering of someone who's in the West Bank or someone who's from Gaza. Mm-hmm. That's my feeling, because I don't have their reality. And I'm only saying I'm Palestinian, the mind of somebody who's from London or from the New York or whatever is going to go, oh, he lives under the occupation in the West Bank, or he lives under siege in Gaza. And that's hijacking somebody else's suffering. And it needs to be given a context. We live in Israeli reality. That's part of who we are. And I feel by not mentioning it, I'm hiding part of who I am. because my reality is that I'm part of the Palestinian people, and I'm not going to hide it by saying Israeli Arab, and I'm not going to say only Palestinian to take the suffering of the West Bank and Gaza as my own when it's not my reality. It's not my, I have a different frustration, different challenges, but it's not that of the West Bank and Gaza. We have an Israeli reality. You know, we use so much Hebrew in our slang. Tell me how many West Bankers use so much Hebrew in their language. That doesn't happen because they have a completely different reality and upbringing. It's not the same as ours. And I feel that we as a population are sometimes invisible when we talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that's unfair. And I want to put an emphasis on it that yes, we are the Palestinians who are Israeli citizens.
So why not 48 Palestinians?
Because I hate the numbers, and 48 is just a stupid number in my opinion, because 48 also means that you were occupied in 1948. Sure, that was 75 years ago. Today we have a different reality of citizens with a lot of challenges, with a lot of discrimination, with what have you, racism. We see it, we face it. You know, we had nation state law. We can go on and on about things that, you know, we are suffering from, but this is in order to move forward. I'm not looking at what happened 75 years ago and say, well, my grandparents were occupied. Every Nakba day, I mourn about it, and I talk to my grandparents about it, and I remember our stories to remember always who I am and where I come from and what my family had to go through. And that today I'm in a different reality. It's just like someone saying, you know, who's from Germany and doesn't want to say he's German because, you know, 90 years ago, they were responsible for the Holocaust. You know, the Nazis are not just an outside group that came to Germany. It's the German people.
I don't like comparisons.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like saying, you know, or any peoplehood.
But you're talking about something that is over and something that's still continuing.
But in order to move forward, we need to accept the reality that we have and look to a better future within that reality. I'm not trying to change the reality altogether and make a new state of Palestine in the whole land. I'm looking to a reality where the two states can exist side by side. One of those states, Malasot, Shunansawi, it's the state of Israel, next to the state of Palestine. And erasing that looks as if I don't want that as part of the future. And that future is a future where can only happen by war, and I'm not looking for war. I'm looking for peace.
I'm pushing as hard as I can, guys. And don't call me a bitch in the comments. So we're going to mix it up. We're going to ask some speed questions where I'm going to ask you a question and you are going to answer with one question, with one word. Okay?
As much as I can, but as quick as I can. I don't know about what word, but okay. Hit me.
How old are you now?
32.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
If you come to London, what cake can I make you?
Oh, I'm a sucker for cheesecake. It's my favorite.
What's your favorite book? Start with a political book.
Political book. One of my favorites, I Shall Not Hate. Fictional, Harry Potter. I read like 1,000 times each.
What house are you?
Between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. I'm too nice, and I believe I have
You're a savior.
Some bravery at heart.
What's your favorite sports team?
Liverpool. I'm a football fan, and my favorite team is Liverpool in England.
Favorite color?
Red, because it's Liverpool.
Music genre. Favorite music genre?
Ooh, rap / hip hop, and a lot of classic Arabic music.
Okay. Any musician, Arabic singer?
So I love Fairuz, I love Kulthum, I love Abdul Halim.
One word. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
When I was a little kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. I read a lot of books about astronomy. And nice. When I got a little older, I wanted to be a psychologist because my mom is a therapist, but then switched to
you see a lot of feminist influence on your upbringing thanks to your mom. Okay, last two questions. Are you single?
Yes.
Ready to mingle?
I did not see that coming.
I'm just trying to lift the spirits up after those questions. Okay, that was the speed round. Let me see. Happy birthday, Ibrahim. Thank you for all the great work that you do. My question is, some people within my community argue that Israel cannot make peace with the Palestinians through a two-state solution because Palestinian national identity was constructed in opposition to Israel and Zionism. As a Palestinian, what would your response be to this? How would you reconcile your Palestinian identity with peace with Israel?
Okay, so to the second part of the question, in my opinion, Palestinian identity, it's a peoplehood, not a political agenda, not a political view, which is a misconception within Israel a lot. We are a people, and within our people, we have different views and different people that believe in different things. My view as a Palestinian, that in order for my people to live dignified life, they need a state of their own. And in order to achieve that, we need to have peace, and war will not grant our people statehood. And to the first part of the question, it's not the only peoplehood in the world that was started because of a conflict. I'm going to take it to them, actually, that the Jewish peoplehood was formed because of a suffering, because they were the Israelites who were all enslaved in Egypt, and they escaped from slavery, and that mutual suffering led them to wanting to create a state of their own and become the Jewish people. V'nehiyenu le'am, what happened in the desert. It actually also, that would be a response to Smotrich's smartass, comment about no existence of Palestinian identity. And he even asked, show me the Palestinian kings that were throughout history. In his rhetoric, there's only maybe 5 or 6 peoplehoods in the whole world. and as someone who's supposed to be religious, he should understand that peoplehood begins when you have a strive for sovereignty and independent state with the same group that has a shared history, which is the same thing that happened to the Jewish people. Peoplehood was not created when they created the first temple. It was when they were in the suffering, in the desert, wanting to create their own state. That's what creates peoplehood.
Okay, this person says, happy birthday. Some Jews like to point to the city of Haifa as a multicultural success story. Jews, Palestinians, Druze, etc., all living in harmony. In your view, is this an accurate representation? Why or why not?
It is unfortunately not the case. It is superficially. When you come from the outside and you come on Christmas time and you see the Hanukkah, what's it called? The menorah of Hanukkah next to the Christmas tree, it looks beautiful. But if you actually live within the city, you know that there are some streets that are predominantly the Arab people live there. Some streets that are predominantly, even within the Jewish community, you have the Russian neighborhood, you have the Moroccan neighborhood, there is somewhat feeling of a segregation. The majority of the people in the Carmel, which is the upper side, and it's the nicer side, is the majority Jewish, and downtown is majority Arab. And even if you go to the bar scene in Haifa, you'll see that a lot of the bars are divided. You have Arab bars and Jewish bars. Not to say that it's 100% the case. Obviously, there are mixes, but that division, to someone who lives it, you can see it. You know where the Arab bars are. You know where the Jewish bars are. And it's maybe a couple of Arabs in the Jewish bar and a couple Jewish people in the Arab bar. But beyond that, there is a feeling of people living, as I always said, here in Israel, we're good neighbors at the best of cases as communities. Maybe as individuals, there are great friends. But as communities, in the best of cases, which is Haifa, we're good neighbors. Not good friends. We're not there yet. One thing that Haifa just changed recently is actually that they're starting to do Arabic in Jewish schools as mandatory.
Okay.
In the Jewish schools in the city of Haifa. So, not to say that it's horrible, blah blah blah. There is a path, but we're not in the glorified place that people try to make it out to be. And especially the universities, Haifa is one of the most segregated places I've ever seen. You have even the coffee shops. Arabs go to one coffee shop, everybody knows it, and the Jewish kids go to another coffee shop. They're very divided in the university in Haifa.
Wow. So the second part of her question was actually, where is it? Is this a useful story to tell ourselves, or does it paper over other problematic truths? So what you're saying basically is that it has potential, but it's not exactly what you think it is.
Yeah, and it's overly
Superficial.
glorified into a place that makes it unreal.
Okay. Next question. What do you and Amira largely disagree on?
What do we disagree on, Amira? I'm going to ask you to help me answer that one, actually, since you've been asking in all the questions today.
I mean, I'm not going to give you the power to switch the roles here. You're the one that's answering the questions. So I'll pitch in after you answer. So, because I want to know what you think we disagree on.
Honestly, I think we agree on a lot of things, which is why we have a good chemistry and we have great discussions. It's also, you know, there are no two people that are exactly the same. That's like physically impossible, even if they're twins. Maybe, you know, you had a different, because we had different upbringings and different realities. There are some things that you see differently than I do. You know, I look at my community as a major key in this conflict. You'd see maybe Jerusalem in a different light of how crucial it is to the conflict. We had different religious upbringings, so you see a different value to the religious education on ending the conflict, where I see it a little bit differently. Not because, you know, the problem for me, it's not the religion, it's the religious. And, you know, I have less faith in the ability of religious people to be, you know, at large, a good power in changing this reality. Some are, but they're way in the minority, and I don't see a change of them becoming the majority.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I think what you what you said are things that maybe we don't fully agree on. Upbringing is a big one. Like, because of our upbringing, we have different opinions on Israeli society. We have different opinions on what we think or picture in our heads when we see certain symbols and images, like the Israeli flag, like uniform. Something that you said once that I thought that was absolutely ridiculous was you approaching an Israeli soldier or police officer asking them for directions, which is something that I wouldn't necessarily do before thinking 10,000 times.
I was lost.
So I think that is a big reason for the difference between how you see, and I tried to see it from your lens. I did in the beginning of the episodes. I was like, okay, Allah, Palestinian Israeli, we're part of the Israeli society, where I don't think we're there yet at all. I think I'll fight for it. That's why I'll use occasionally Palestinian Israeli in order to empathize and to gain other people's empathy. But I don't think we're there yet. I think we're fooling ourselves to think that we are part of the Israeli society. I think it's very clear, especially after the 7th, how traumatized and acting on that trauma the Israeli society is when it comes to not only Palestinians, but Arabs as well. So that is a big point of difference, I think, and the roles of our societies. I think I believe in the role that 48 Palestinians or Palestinian Israelis or whatever the fuck have. I think they have a big role, and that must be utilized when it comes to politics, when it comes to education, when it comes to building that bridge between Palestinians that aren't citizens of Israel and other Palestinians, on breaking that power dynamic and how they can become powerful and give power to other Palestinians. And then it becomes Palestinian giving power to Palestinian instead of Jewish person giving power to a Palestinian. But yeah, I think the most important thing is that we agree on the end goal. Even though we might disagree on, like, I think maybe, like, we're human beings, we might one day wake up and it's like, you know what, maybe two-state solution isn't the way to go. But I think we agree that a resolution where both people's security is put into consideration and liberation is put into consideration is what we agree on, and that's the most important thing. Some brilliant person asked, happy birthday, Ibrahim. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and how can we support?
One thing that we are now, we started is our Patreon, because we are launching not just a podcast, we are taking it to the next level of starting our own movement. And for that to be our full time, we need you guys' support in order for us to actually, you know, be able to record as much as possible, to be also physically on the ground as much as possible. Your support on our Patreon will mean the world to us, so we can keep doing what we're doing and keep spreading our message of nuance, tolerance, and Anything else?
No, I think you said that. The way to support is basically to go to our bio, see the links that we have to offer. One is joining our community through the Patreon, and the other is donating through a link.
Or if you have any skill set that you would love to, help us and volunteer. If you're a video editor, if you are a translator, we would love your help. We have a lot of videos that need to be edited and a lot of help in that realm. So
you can reach us on our email, which is info@thirdnarrative.com. And since we're talking about the volunteers, I would like to say thank you for everyone who has reached out to volunteer and is currently working on volunteering. We're not talking about the New York event yet, so I'm not going to give out the details on that, but we had a lot of people who volunteered to help to make that possible, and we're truly grateful. Last question is going to be a very light one that I know you're going to love. Someone asked, have you ever had a Rita of your own?
So just into context, because not everybody understands what the...
I'm sure everyone who listens to us knows your obsession with Mahmoud Darwish and Rita.
I don't know if it's an obsession. It's a path forward for me. It's like, if the Palestinian national poet dated a Jewish woman for 2 years, he did not, to go back to that question that was asked, that didn't eliminate his identity. The fact that she's Israeli and Jewish, that didn't diminish his own identity as a Palestinian and becoming the national poet. And that, for me, is the best path forward. And love is the best way. And I did have my own Rita story as well, maybe a couple, but definitely one specific one where we dated for 3 years almost. So we surpassed Mahmoud Darwish's 2 year. Yeah, we dated for 3 years, and
was it like Mahmoud Darwish? Did she go to the army?
It was actually, funnily enough, it was not the political things that made it the hardest. I think actually politically we aligned very well, and I was in a very positive relationship. It was a very empowering relationship. Something that it helped me learn a lot and actually exposed me even more than I did before to the Jewish community, getting even more so, to learn and to share with the Jewish community, and also her sharing with mine. The challenge was actually religion.
Wow.
Where she was more religious than I am, and wanted more religion to be more present in our, potential future. And I didn't see it as such. I saw, my life, I'm very secular, and I saw my life, in the future secular and not, one that has a lot of religious influence. And I felt, and also Judaism as a religion is very, it's a very strong as a community. And I felt that I would be excluded from that if...
With kids, Yani?
Yeah, in the future, if, our life would be very predominantly Jewish, which also eliminates part of who I am. And I didn't want to diminish who I am. And for me, the best way forward was, if we had, I don't know, half and half and, share both cultures, I would be willing, if I was willing to do like Shabbat, all these things, which I think Shabbat is a beautiful concept of having once a week, the whole family once a week, we sit down, we have dinner. No changes, which is beautiful concept. And culturally, I love the Chagim. I used to do them with my friends all the time, and I still do. But not on a very religious concept and a religious, very religious
Is it
element.
because you're not religious yourself and you're going to feel pressured to represent basically
not
for
even,
the kids?
I feel like both? I would be diminished from my identity would be diminished, because if one person has religion as very strong part of what their future was going to be and the other one doesn't, it's like the other one should kind of give in, even though that for me my secular life is not just I'm living hayallah like randomly within the world. No, I have my own values and my own view of the world that comes from my secular views. It's not like I'm not going to teach my, my kids or whatever about, positive things that I learned from Islam that got me to where I am today, but not in a very strong present, dominant way in my future. I just didn't see it as such. And that was for me challenging, and that's it. It was 3 years, but the story ended there.
So there you have it, a very exclusive interview with Ibrahim Abu Ahmad. I hope I answered all the questions, or at least as many as I can from the many interesting questions that you sent me. It's a bit difficult with the long answers that Ibrahim has to offer.
Your questions are difficult. They're not easy.
Now I'm just pulling your leg. I tried to be like as harsh as possible, and I tried to nudge you as much as possible. I liked it.
I have to say, I wasn't planning on to for yours, but just you wait now that you did that. I wasn't planning on making your life difficult, but now I will.
Good segue on that. Please send us any and all questions that you have for me, for Ibrahim to target me next time.
Please, guys, tough ones only. Easy questions will not be accepted.
And remember, at the end of the day, everyone living from the river to the sea deserves better.